Im is set to be the final villain of One Piece, which begs the question, as the last and likely strongest enemy Luffy will ever face, what will be Im's powers? For so long, we thought we knew all the strongest characters in the One Piece world. First it was supposedly Whitebeard, then we were told it was Kaido, now many feel it is Shanks, or Dragon, or Akainu, but at the end of the day, whereas many of these characters are portrayed to be at least in the same comparable tier to one another, the one character that absolutely no one knows about, who has in fact been the King of the Seas for the last 800 years, has very likely been the strongest all along, and is very possibly well beyond any of these other supposed strongest characters. So what will make Im a cut above the rest? Haki? An all-powerful devil fruit? Or is it something else entirely? Today we are going to be breaking down the 4 most likely answers to the truth of Im's powers, based on all the hints we have gotten in the story so far. So before we get into it, make sure to subscribe, and I need to know, do you want to eat better and save money? Then you should be using HelloFresh, the cost-effective meal prep service. HelloFresh sends you easy-to-prepare meals sent straight to your door, so you don't have to waste time planning out what to make for dinner or go shopping for groceries. You just open up your HelloFresh box and you have a delicious dinner ready in 15 minutes. It's less expensive than takeout, it's less expensive than delivery, and it's less time-consuming than making meals from scratch. Not to mention, you can find exactly the type of food that you want to eat with literally 40 weekly recipes to choose from. I've been using HelloFresh for a long time now, and at this point I can't imagine going back to grocery shopping and planning dinners without HelloFresh, since it's just been saving me so much time to be able to, at the end of a long day of work, just open up a box of ready-to-go ingredients and instantly throw together a great meal with nearly zero effort. And the best part is you can get 65% off your HelloFresh order. Just go to HelloFresh.com and use code MrMorge65 for 65% off plus free shipping. That's HelloFresh.com, code MrMorge65 for 65% off plus free shipping, link in the description below. So that aside, let's look at the first and most simple possibility for the source of Im's power. Im might wield the ancient weapon Uranus. This is a well-known theory and many signs point to it. Uranus is the final missing ancient weapon, and we have absolutely zero clues to suggest that it is on the Blue Sea. Not a single poneglyph has ever hinted at its location. But on the other hand, we do know that Marijoa houses some sort of secret treasure, with which one could conceivably rule the world. We also know that Uranus is named after the god of the sky, and that Im rules the world from the sky far above in the clouds. Not to mention the other ancient weapons have been following a pattern of being located in relation to their namesakes. Poseidon as the god of the ocean is located under the sea. Pluton as the god of the underworld is buried deep underground. And so it would follow that Uranus as the god of the sky would be located at the highest point in the One Piece world. Lastly, it would also explain how Im was able to completely destroy the Logia Kingdom, as the attack that destroyed the island was far stronger than anything else we've ever seen in the story by any devil fruit. The closest thing we've seen that is even comparable by a devil fruit was Enel's Rygo, and that was only possible thanks to Enel artificially boosting his devil fruit's power with Maxim. In general, an attack of this scale, launched from such a far distance, does not seem doable with a devil fruit alone, suggesting that it may only be possible with an ancient weapon. Now, if Uranus is the primary source of Im's power, if Im is going to be using Uranus to fight, then it would parallel the idea of Enel quite a bit, as in Skypiea, Enel himself wasn't that strong of a fighter, but he was still far more powerful than anyone else on the White Sea, because he had an extremely broken devil fruit. In the context of the current story, we now have Haki to combat broken devil fruits. But what if Im is kind of the scaled up version of Enel for the modern day? So not that strong of a fighter relative to the best in the Blue Sea, but still simply far more powerful than anyone else because he has an extremely broken ancient weapon. Now there are a couple counterpoints to this. First is that Uranus, being an island-destroying weapon of mass destruction, may be a little redundant, as it is essentially exactly the same as Pluton. If anything, it would simply be strictly better than Pluton and make Pluton pointless, since Pluton is a ship that has to travel around to blow things up, whereas Im can seemingly destroy islands from anywhere. Second, going back to Enel's abilities, Enel actually had two prominent abilities. He had not just offensive force, but also omniscience. He could hear all the voices on Skypiea and know exactly who he needed to eliminate from far away. That omniscience was one of the two key abilities that made him God. We see Im act similarly in that he regularly selects certain lights that need to be extinguished from history, and then enacts destruction, suggesting that like Enel, Im may also have some degree of prediction or omniscience to go along with his destructive powers. As such, if Im operates with two primary godlike abilities like Enel, then that opens up the possibility that rather than being a destructive weapon like Pluton, Uranus may be something that is granting Im an omniscient sort of ability instead, which in turn would mean that whatever Im used as his offensive power to destroy Lucia Kingdom was some other ability of Im's entirely. This is further elaborated on in this video analyzing the potential power of Uranus sometime back. It should also be noted that it may be considered slightly disappointing if the final villain of One Piece doesn't have a strong combat power or devil fruit ability of their own, but is rather simply using an ancient weapon to fight, so that is a subjective factor to consider. So we have three possibilities that emerge from this. Either A, as we just discussed, Im destroyed the Lucia Kingdom with Uranus and Im will be using Uranus to fight Luffy. B, Im destroyed the Lucia Kingdom with Uranus, but he doesn't actually use Uranus to fight, and instead he has some additional personal combat ability to fight with that is also extremely powerful. Or C, Im did not use Uranus to destroy the Lucia Kingdom, Uranus does something else entirely, and Im actually used his own personal ability to destroy the Lucia Kingdom. Since we've already discussed option A, let's look at option B. If Im destroyed the Lucia Kingdom with Uranus, then what ability could Im personally have that would still make him an extremely powerful final villain? Well, many have pointed out that Im's full name, Imu, is the same as Umi backwards, and Umi means the sea. Could Im have something like the ocean devil fruit or the water devil fruit? This would be fitting in many ways, since first of all, the final question that is being posed for One Piece is, who will rule the seas? And as we learned later on, there actually is already a king of the seas, the world just doesn't know it yet. Imu has ruled the seas for 800 years, so the question is not so much who will become the first king of the seas, as much as who can overthrow the existing one. So as the king of the seas, it would make sense that Im's ability would literally be controlling the sea, with a sea-based devil fruit. It's interesting as Whitebeard was also referred to as King of the Seas in a way, as most people believed him to be the strongest character in the world at the time, with of course no one knowing about Im's existence. And Whitebeard's ability was revealed to be utilizing the force of the sea, creating tsunamis with his quakes, basically being able to move the ocean itself. In that same vein, Im as the literal king of the sea may genuinely simply have the true version of that sort of ability, with a sea devil fruit straight up, able to control the seas at his command. And not only does this fit symbolically, if a water devil fruit did exist and someone had it, then that individual would naturally be the terror of all other devil fruit users, as the sea drains devil fruit users of their powers, and the mother sea is noted to be the enemy of devil fruits. Now, while this is a very interesting idea, some quick counterpoints to this. It should be noted that this may again make a certain other extremely important ability in the series redundant, as Blackbeard's signature power is his darkness fruit, which pretty much does the exact same thing. It cancels out other devil fruit abilities. And Blackbeard is already the other most important villain of One Piece alongside Im. For Luffy to fight Blackbeard and Im back to back, it may feel like taking on a very similar challenge twice to end the story if Im's ability is water. It should also be noted that just because water is extremely effective against devil fruit users, there are so many strong characters in One Piece that this ability would be completely irrelevant against. For someone like Shanks, or Garp, or Mihawk, or even Endgame Zoro, fighting Im would basically just be the same as fighting any other Logia user. To non-devil fruit users, there's nothing that inherently makes a water Logia stronger than a magma magma Logia or an ice Logia, which would make water a kind of odd choice for a final villain, since I would imagine that a godlike final villain like Im would have a power that would be a huge threat to everyone, something that makes him seem nearly invincible in a manner that no one but Luffy can defeat, similar to Enel. However, at the same time, it's possible that Im's water fruit, or sea fruit, may simply operate on a much larger scale than any other Logia abilities, so that could still potentially make Im an overpowered threat. But let's now look at that final hypothetical. What if Im did not use Uranus to destroy the Logia kingdom? What if Uranus does something else entirely, and Im was actually able to destroy the Logia kingdom with his own personal ability? In that case, Im's devil fruit wouldn't be a water Logia, but rather two new exciting possibilities emerge. Im was able to destroy the Logia kingdom with overwhelming power from far away. No devil fruit should have the ability to do this, unless, what if he ate a fruit that would make sense as being the most powerful fruit of all, something far beyond any other fruit's abilities? What if Im ate the mythical Zoan, God fruit? See, we learned something very interesting recently. For a long time, we've wondered whether real phoenixes exist in the One Piece world, whether real nine-tailed foxes exist, and so on. Since there are mythical Zoan-type devil fruits of these creatures, do these creatures exist independently in the One Piece world? Well, as it turns out, whether or not they exist is irrelevant. Devil fruits are simply the products of people's dreams. An idea that I expand upon in this analysis, they are powers born from people's imagination and aspirations, the desires to have a certain power. If people can imagine the power of a phoenix, or the power of a dragon, then it can become reality in the form of a fruit. It would explain how a very specific mythical Zoan such as a giant Buddha exists. People believed in this depiction of Buddha as almost a deity, and so that power to become that being exists in the One Piece world. It's the same way people believed in the concept of a god of freedom, Nika, that represents the sun. And so if enough people believe in the dream of such a being, then that dream can become reality in the form of a fruit. And so finally that begs the question, why would there not simply be a god fruit? Now you might be saying, well, doesn't Luffy already have a god fruit? And I'm not saying a god fruit like the sun god, I'm saying the plain and simple god fruit. Let me explain. The concept of Nika as a sun god, as explained in One Piece, seems to be in the same vein as Greek or Norse or Hindu concepts of gods. The idea that there are certain gods that represent certain things. The sun god represents freedom, etc. In general, when gods are phrased as, say, the sun god Apollo, the implication is that people aren't saying that this is the one and only god. So when the Shandians or the Giants mention their belief in a sun god, that just sounds like maybe their most prominent god that they believe in their particular religion, but not necessarily the singular or only god in their minds. After all, the description of Nika sounds more like a specific god that represents a particular concept. He's a warrior that brings freedom, rather than a singular, all-powerful, omnipotent god that created the world, etc. I mean, even as they talk about the sun god, they also reference gods of the rain, the forest, and the land as well, and even believe that the giant snake is a god itself. Essentially, when it comes to the word god, there is a big difference when something is being referred to as a god versus when something is referred to as just God. Which makes it so interesting that in the broader One Piece world, outside of specific religions like the Shandians and the Giants, the general populace of the One Piece world, the majority of people, all seem to reference a monotheistic concept of God, with characters regularly mentioning if they do or don't pray to God, begging God for forgiveness, praying to God to save them. Essentially, the majority of the world believes in God, singular. So if the Nika fruit exists as the manifestation of a sun god that certain religions believe in, why not then would a singular god fruit not exist as the manifestation of the singular concept of God that the rest of the One Piece world believes in? After all, Nika can most accurately be described as one particularly important god of the Shandian religion, hence the existence of a Nika fruit born out of these people's imagination. At the same time, the majority of people in One Piece seem to believe in God in the monotheistic Judeo-Christian sense, which would imply that a straight-up god fruit should exist as well. And if any character in One Piece would have such an ability, if any character would have eaten that fruit, it would be Im, the established god of the world. And if any ability in One Piece would make sense as being far more powerful than all other abilities, it would of course be that god fruit. Again, going back to Skypiea, Enel was a false god, who had the godlike power of lightning to fit that concept. So in the finale of the story, we are dealing with yet again another false god, but one that is far more powerful and important than Enel ever was. So at this point, instead of just a devil fruit ability like lightning that is reminiscent of godlike abilities, what if Im just has the god fruit straight up? Who knows what its full capabilities are, but I wouldn't be surprised if it is capable of mass destruction from far away on the scale of Logia Kingdom. I think the possibility that Im has the mythical Zoan god fruit is definitely an interesting possibility, and the reality is that ever since the mythical Zoan Nika was revealed, and Vegapunk explained the origin of devil fruits in general, the possibility of a true singular god fruit in One Piece has officially been on the table. And with that in mind, there is still one more possibility to discuss here in the same line of thinking. So when Im destroyed the Logia Kingdom, it was preceded by the act of Im crossing something off a map. Now we know that Luffy's abilities at the moment can be described as reality warping in some way. Interestingly, in the One Piece YouTuber Reverie, I believe it was YouTuber Parvision who mentioned that perhaps what Im is capable of doing is also reality warping in a different manner. Perhaps Im crossing off an island on the map, that singular act is literally erasing the Logia Kingdom from existence. I don't know what this devil fruit ability would be, perhaps the ability to rewrite reality in a sense, to erase whatever he so chooses to erase, but it would be fitting for several reasons. First of all, this is of course an extremely godlike ability in itself. I would argue that more than controlling the ocean, more than extremely powerful destructive beams of energy, the ability to literally rewrite reality is the singular most godlike ability that there is. That is truly what would make one god. Obviously, there must be some limits or Im would just be able to do this sort of thing all the time, but for the moment, if we imagine that this is what he can do, it would fit the vision of what God is better than anything else. But what's more important is that it would play into a particularly significant concept from Luffy vs. Enel. The idea of what made Enel God in Skypiea was that his ability was genuinely too powerful for anyone to even be able to do anything to him. All the strongest warriors in the White Sea could be lined up before him and would be nothing more than ants, absolutely helpless against him. Luffy was ultimately only able to fight Enel not because Luffy was also like 100 times stronger than everyone else and was on the same overpowered level as Enel, but rather it was because Luffy's ability was specifically the one ability that could actually counter Enel's. I feel that if Im is to have that same sort of effect as Enel in the endgame of the story, to truly feel like a godlike opponent, it would be most effective if it truly felt like no one else could even touch him, with Luffy being the one exception. Now you might be saying that this is always the case. Isn't Luffy always the only one strong enough to beat the final villain? And that's true, Luffy's usually the only one strong enough to actually beat the final villain. But there's a big difference between that and the Enel scenario. Because if we look at other final bosses, even against someone like Kaido, it's clear that other characters can still put up a fight against Kaido and hurt Kaido, especially with teamwork. Against Doflamingo, it's also clear that other characters can put up a fight against Doflamingo and hurt Doflamingo. In all of One Piece, Enel was the one and only time that you could take literally all the strongest characters of the arc, line them up, have them fight the villain at the same time, and they would all be absolutely helpless and defeated effortlessly. That was what made Enel truly feel like God, rather than just the traditional, extremely strong final boss. It was the sense that he was genuinely untouchable, and that his ability was truly absolute, until Luffy came along. So at the end of the story, if Oda were to aim to mimic that feeling with Im, to make us feel again as though we have a villain that is so powerful that even characters like Shanks, Dragon, Garp, end of story Zoro, Kid, Mihawk, etc. all of these insanely powerful characters are nothing before him, but somehow Luffy is able to defeat this god anyway, then perhaps the matchup aspect will be the most important factor again, echoing Luffy vs. Enel, with Luffy being God's one and only natural enemy once again. And that brings me back to the possibility of Im being a reality warper as a good Devil Fruit matchup. Because if the Nika fruit is going to be something that specifically counters Im's fruit, then the only reason I could think of that would make sense would be if Im's fruit allows Im to control or manipulate reality in some way, but that the Nika fruit with its cartoon logic would simply be unaffected or simply be able to somehow skirt around these reality warping effects with its own weird tricks. Again, Luffy wouldn't be as overpowered as God. It's not like Luffy himself can just erase islands off the map. It's just that it would be the same as in Skypiea, where Luffy would just be unaffected by God's abilities in a particular way that no one else could do. Definitely giving us the feeling, yet again, of Luffy being that one source of hope that can bring freedom when absolutely everyone else is powerless to do anything. So which of these options makes the most sense to you? Let me know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this video then definitely like and subscribe, and you can get my extended thoughts on this and all future topics by becoming a member. Just hit the button below.